Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. Yeah. I don't know if I'm actually live. YouTube seems to be... Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good. All right, so yeah, welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. We're playing some Griftlands today. Griftlands was what I played on Wednesday during the variety stream on a whim. Just grabbed a weird little card game called Griftlands that was overwhelmingly positive rated. And I've been playing it pretty much nonstop since then, aside from, working. It's really damn good, man. I really like this game. This is easily one of the best digital card games I've played to date. And I think I like it better than Slay the Spire. Because I like the sort of, the branching narrative aspect. I like the negotiation thing is really cool. I like that a lot. I like it all. I just like it all. I wouldn't say I'm fantastic at it at this point. I have finished a run with Rook. I don't think I finished a run with Sal yet. And then the third character, Smith, they only recently added, and since it's in early access, there's only like a couple days you can play with him. So I did that successfully, but that, that's not that difficult. And then what you're supposed to do is after you complete a run, then you unlock like higher difficulties. And you're supposed to just keep going and keep going and keep going. But it's really good. And it's a game I'm probably just going to keep popping in, multiple times. Check in and see what they're adding, what they're doing, when they finish Smith's whole story, and you can do a full run of that, and they'll probably add more characters, and yeah, it's gonna be good. Bring down that audio a little bit. All right, so let's see. This week on this channel, we did Cyberpunk, we did Final Fantasy, we did the variety stream, we did Two Brothers Play, we got Dragon Quest, so on and so forth. That's how it's been for a while now, but I think this next week we're gonna switch things up a little bit. Let me just double check. I have, I believe, 2 more Dragon Quest videos to upload and 1 more Cyberpunk video to upload. So tonight will be the second last Dragon Quest. Tomorrow will be the last Cyberpunk. I think. Yes, that should be correct. Then Tuesday will be the last Dragon Quest. Then Wednesday will be a variety stream. Then Thursday, we will start the Doom Eternal DLC, which should be plenty exciting. Some rip-roaring excitement. And then Friday will be the first video for Dragon Quest 6, which is not that rip-roaring exciting, but it exists. It has to be uploaded. So that's how that's gonna go. The idea was to finish Final Fantasy VI for Two Brothers Play next Saturday. I don't know if that'll actually happen. It seems a little optimistic. Maybe it'll be a longer stream. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. And for the variety stream on Wednesday, I was thinking of maybe doing Baldur's Gate 3 early access. Just see what it looks like, you know, for a couple hours or so. Just, I don't want to do a let's play of an early access game or anything like that, but as a variety stream, just taking a look. Because, I mean, I'm going to have to buy it at some point anyways. We could give it a look. That's my current thought. I'm gonna be receiving Bloodborne, the board game. It's shipped out, but I'm apparently getting it Thursday. Now I'd like to do a stream where I do an unboxing, like, because there's gonna be a lot of shit. There's gonna be a lot of shit I'm unboxing. So I'd like to do like a variety stream unboxing the Bloodborne board game. So I could just delay to Thursday and just do it then. But you know, we can do it whenever. It's not urgent. Title says okay. Whoops. Let's see. Hanging with Mangg, episode 330. Thank you for letting me know. Just me, or is this like first mission combat seem really excessive? I mean, look at this damage I'm taking. This is the first combat. I can't even defend against this. Look at that. That's insane. That's insane. I'm gonna die here. Apparently, I'm way worse at this game than I thought. Yeah, I'm dead. Wow. That's certainly the worst run I've ever seen. That seems a little excessive. Oh my god. Let's give that another try.
You've pictured your revenge so many times. But what if she gets you first? What if someone else does? You scratch those thoughts out like lines.
All right, anyways, so yeah, that's the schedule for this coming week. Over on the Exploring series, I released a video on the Mars, the history written by the victors, Mars, time erasal, history changing. Yeah. Then I did a Q&A that went pretty well. I enjoy doing the Q&As. And I worked on another DJ Cactus video, 3785 Jasper's Hill, which is basically a slasher film set in the SCP universe with an SCP kind of twist to it. Initially, so I added that in October to the polls on Patreon, and I was like, this would be a great video to do right around Halloween. And I could have just said, all right, we're not doing a poll this week. I'm just picking this one because I think this would be a good fit for Halloween. But I was like, no, we'll keep it democratic. And I just put in to describe the video, I was like, all right, it's DJ Cactus's version of a slasher film. And I was like, okay, people are going to vote for that. It's October. People are going to pick it. It didn't get picked until now. So it's a little out of place. I feel like, I probably should have just done it in October and, been done with it. But I guess it doesn't really matter. And very short video. I mean, it's only like a little over 16 minutes long. But that's fine because I had a lot of work to do this week on the Final Fantasy video that I will be releasing on Friday, episode 2 of the story of Final Fantasy 14. I think last week I said that I was planning on doing A Realm Reborn in about 8 episodes. I don't know if that's really going to be accurate because my initial idea for this second episode was going to be covering all the quests between levels 15 and 20. Because I was like, oh, there's 3 dungeons in there that are a bunch of quests, but that's real quick. Then there's just a bunch of nonsense, and then there's a trial, and then there's some more nonsense with like picking your grand company, and we could probably do that. No, we only got to the trial, so a little over half, I guess, of the 15 to 20 quests for the most part. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of shit in there. And so looking at like the 21 to 30 quest, that might take like Definitely 2. I would live with 3, but I can't do more than 3. Then I gotta adjust my pace or something. We're including too much. Yeah, and 31 to 40. I mean, you get into Kurthos and all that, and it's just, yeah, there's a lot of shit. So I don't know. Right now I'm a little concerned because I didn't get as much done. I didn't put in as much in the second episode as I perhaps wanted, but it might end up being a better video, or at least a better ending, because the second episode will end with the big, cool battle against Ifrit. Whereas if I had just gone through the rest of the 20 quests, it would have ended with us, like, getting a chocobo. So, I think it'll work out. I think it'll probably be a good episode. I'm going to start editing it together today. And, yeah, we'll see how it goes with the dungeons. That's the big concern for the second episode, is how are the dungeons going to work? How are they going to look? Am I going to be able to do a musical montage, or is it just going to be some boring voiceover? We're going to see. So, yeah, that's mainly what my focus is right now, is just getting this Final Fantasy video done. I think it will be about the same length. Probably a little bit longer. The written length is about the same as the first one, but with the dungeons involved, it's, and the trial, it's probably going to be a little bit longer. And I think there's a little bit more voiced quests that I'll be throwing in, some cutscenes. So I wouldn't be, probably 45, 46 minutes would be my guess.
Party's home. Shut that.
That's what's going on with that. Yeah. All right. Moving on. Let's see. So, board games. As I mentioned, I'm getting Bloodborne. And also, I just bought another board game. Called The King's Dilemma. The King's Dilemma. This is a narrative legacy game that is basically meant for 5 people, and each person is running sort of a house, like a house of lords or whatever, whatever they call it, in a fictional fantasy kingdom. And you're all sort of I don't know if any of you are the king or you're just sort of like appealing to the king in like the court, the king's court. You're part of the king's court, I think. And basically what the game consists of is all sorts of situations and scenarios and dilemmas and questions, things like that would come up in a court of a fictional fantasy kingdom. And you as players just argue and debate and negotiate over each of these scenarios, each of these situations that come up. All of you with your own personal agendas, your own personal goals, your own personal sort of philosophies. So some of the houses are like excessively greedy, and so their only care is just accumulating money for themselves. Other houses are really altruistic and really just care about the fate of the kingdom itself. They're a bit more selfless, and they also have their own personal agendas, of course, but other houses might be more interested in warfare and being, trying to conquer other kingdoms and blah, blah, blah. And some of these, like, narrative goals of these kingdoms is, like, discover, how to create gold using alchemy and, things like that. There's just, I mean, that's as far as I understand currently. We haven't started playing. And so that's it. It's, there's rules involved for how you try to, accomplish these things and how you want to sway things to your own benefit. But that's pretty much it. It's just sort of a negotiation game where you're just arguing and discussing these different things that pop up, and you're sort of weighing in on morality and some ethics and some hard choices. Sometimes you're dealing with slavery and injustice, discrimination. I mean, there's a big warning as the first thing in the rulebook is this warning about how there's going to be some potentially uncomfortable situations that pop up. But yeah, social board games are really the only thing that really excite me in board games nowadays. So I heard about this back when like COVID started, and I was like, this looks really cool, but it's not something I want to play on Tabletop Simulator. I don't want to do a negotiation, round table kind of thing on Tabletop Simulator. So now that we're going to start kind of getting back together, picked it up. I'm really excited. It comes with, it's a legacy game. So you're going to be like writing on sheets, and you're going to be tearing things up and modifying like the map, and things are going to happen. And it comes with 74 envelopes waiting to be opened throughout the course of the game. And closed envelopes that you get to open make every board game better. So yeah, I'm excited to give that a try. I don't know when we'll get around to it, but it's possible I'll stream it, because probably would be kind of interesting to watch as we just sort of sit there and I yell at Mert for being a piece of shit for 2 hours. I mean, that's always good.
So
yeah, so that's what's going on there. Let's talk about D&D, or not D&D, Knave technically, but we call it D&D with my family. So we had 6 players during our D&D session this weekend, with me as the DM. So there were 7 of us around the table, which is quite a bit. And now another one of my cousins and her boyfriend are interested in joining up with us to play D&D. They've never played it before, but my aunt has just been raving about it to her, and they're both interested. They're both sort of nerdy people, you know? And so they're both, you know, interested in nerdy things, but they've never played D&D, and this is the perfect opportunity. So that will bring our player count up to 8. With me as the DM, 9 people around a single table. Yeah. Now, really, the best thing to do would be to break this up into 2 separate groups and play across 2 separate nights. But I don't really want to DM 2 separate games. I don't even want to DM 1, really. But we have 8 players that are new to D&D, or relatively new. No one is going to DM except for me. So that it just is what it is. And you know, no one wants to be part of like a secondary group, you know, because really the one group would be like the original group of players that we first started with, which was basically 4 players and me. That was the original group we started with. They would still want to remain, you know, a group. They wouldn't want to split up. But then the other group would be just sort of like the leftovers that wouldn't get to, you know, unless you start double dipping. But then what's the point? You might as well just have everyone play at once. So we're just gonna have everyone play at once. Probably gonna be disastrous. It's probably just gonna be them sitting there for like an hour during any situation, debating over and over about what to do, because you got 8 different voices, 8 different opinions about how things should go. Combat is gonna be a slog, because, you know, if I don't increase the number of enemies in each encounter, they're just going to steamroll everything. I mean, they could just fucking mob violence. Right now, all of them have crossbows. They all are like, crossbow is everything. Crossbow is the way to go. So whenever they start a fight, they all just whip out their crossbows and just rain shots on anything in sight. So they already are doing that. I'm sure they would rope the new 2 players into doing that as well. So I have to increase, you know, the amount of enemies involved. But that means that, you know, these fights are going to start taking a decent chunk of time. I mean, we're playing Knave, which is as simple as combat can get, really, while still involving D20 rolls. But you know, when you take your turn, you then have to wait for 7 other people to take their turns. And then you have to wait for me to do all the enemies and however many they are, and how, you know, each of them get a turn.
So
And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I'm thinking of switching off of Knave and going to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, I don't really care that much for D&D 5th edition. I mean, obviously, my favorite fantasy game is Shadow of the Demon Lord. But Shadow of the Demon Lord is not a good fit for this group because they don't care about the character customization, really. They're not going to read any books and look into the different spells, and, you know, they're not going to do any of that. And Shadow of the Demon Lord has a rather grim tone to it, which they're not really interested in. And it's not really an OSR game, so it's not perfectly compatible with OSR modules. I mean, you can run any, you know, whatever, but you can adapt. But just like, that's why I picked Knave, is because I can just run OSR stuff straight out the box.
your corner.
Whereas, you know, if I wanted to run Shadow of the Demon Lord adventures, they're all pretty grim and dark. Now, the guy doing Shadow of the Demon Lord is working on a new system that's sort of a revamped Shadow of the Demon Lord that's more family friendly, more traditional sort of fantasy. But that's not out yet, so. But okay, so the reason that I am thinking about switching to 5th edition D&D, even though I don't really care for it, is because playing D&D compared to playing something in the OSR tends to be a lot easier for players as far as like survivability. Like, OSR is often very lethal, and if you look at OSR modules, there's a lot of like, here, you instantly die if you fuck this up, or, you know, enemies can kill you in 1 or 2 shots early on, or probably even later on. You know, it's relatively simplistic most of the time, but it's lethal, and that you either like that or you don't like that. So that's part of it, is that D&D is more heroic. It's more, you know, pulpy, I guess. They can just rush in and be heroes, and I don't have to sweat too much, like, oh, you're gonna die and then we gotta make a new character, and, you know, whatever. You can die in D&D, of course, but it's a lot easier for the DM to kind of fudge it. There's a lot more, you know, magical healing involved, and you can raise people from the dead fairly easily, you know, and it's just, D&D is more, modern D&D is just more of a heroic fantasy kind of game. So that's part of it. That's part of it. Another one is that Knave is awesome for like new players and short games. Like, if I just want to run a quick one-shot with some new people, and, you know, I just want to grab an OSR adventure, and I don't really care if they die, and we can just get in real simple and go, Knave is great. But we've got 8 people involved now that are all super interested in continuing to play every single week. And pretty much, if we keep playing only Knave, I'm gonna just lose my mind. Because I'm just not interested in creating my own campaign. It's just not something I'm about. I only really care about running pre-written stuff. And pre-written OSR stuff is mainly about combat. And if we keep doing combat in Knave, I'm gonna lose my mind because nothing interesting happens. None of the characters have like practically any special abilities. It literally, all it is I shoot my crossbow, and then the next person is I shoot my crossbow, I shoot my, you know, that's it. And the enemies are just like, occasionally you'll come across an enemy that has like magic spells or something like that, but most of the time it's I shoot my crossbow as the enemy, you know, or I stab with my spear, and that's it. Eventually I'm not gonna be able to take it. So, because they're interested in combat. You know, when I play, I never want to do combat, regardless of the system, so it doesn't really matter. But they're interested in doing combat. So if I have to run combat, as we are doing here, then we gotta switch it up. We gotta make it more interesting for me, at least. And I think it'll be more interesting for them. So, obviously, D&D allows for some more interesting combat. Longer combat, I mean, these combats are going to take quite a while with 8 players in D&D 5th edition. I don't know how they're going to really feel about that. We'll see. And I know they're not gonna read anything. They're not gonna be interested in reading anything about their characters. So I'm basically gonna create all their characters for them. Yeah, I'll ask them some questions to sort of fill in the blanks, but I'm gonna create the characters for them, and I'm gonna do any leveling up that they need to handle. I'm basically gonna try to give them as simplistic a character sheet as they want. Like my cousin and I believe her boyfriend, they're both pretty highly educated. They both love to read, so I think they could probably handle a little bit more text-filled character sheet than, say, my mom. But yeah, for everyone else, it'll be pretty simple. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad decision, but, you know, if we just keep playing Knave, I don't know what the fuck I'll do. That would just... It would just be annoying. Anyways, so moving on to the actual session we had with 6 players. So my dad decided not to come. I think he wanted to just take a week off. And so instead, another one of my cousins tagged along and wasn't even planning on playing D&D. He was just gonna like watch TV. But I'm like, well, why don't you just play? I mean, you can use my dad's character, give it a shot. And he was like, okay, I don't care. So he ended up really liking it, of course, because why wouldn't you? But I don't know if he's going to be a regular or not. We'll see. If we bump it up to 9 players, that's going to just... what the fuck? And so the session started. They were at the base of this mountain range, these spires, and they had pretty much 3 options. They could go check out these goblin caves, they could go check out these dwarven ruins, and they could go check out these this camp of cannibals. And they pretty much had no interest in checking out the cannibals whatsoever. So it was basically them debating between going to the goblins or going to these dwarven ruins. And they know that they are on this mission to retrieve these 3 treasures, these 3 heirlooms. They know that that's their goal. They were initially completely under the impression that all these treasures would be in one spot. They think that there's a big dragon and all the treasures are with one dragon. And so they're like, the dragon is probably under the dwarven ruins. Let's go there. So I sort of had to gently suggest that, you know, there's 3 locations. You're probably going to have to go to all 3. And I sort of gently suggested that, well, goblins are probably the easiest foes that you could encounter in this area. You know, suggesting that maybe they start by going to the goblins. But no, they decided we're going to go to the dwarven ruins. That really appealed to them. That's what interested them. So it doesn't really matter to me.
That's enough.
So they start climbing up this staircase, running along the mountain, carved out of the stone of the mountain. And they hear a voice as they start climbing that's like, who dares, you know, enter the halls of the dwarven lords, or something like that. And so they give some sort of answer. They're like, we come in peace. But the voice is coming from this bugbear. The dwarven ruins is basically where this group of bandits is hiding out. And the bandits are in league with this local lady who is vying for the... she's vying to become the new Baroness. And so she doesn't want anyone to recover these heirlooms, because these heirlooms are what's causing this curse on the Baron, and the Baron is going to die soon unless these things are recovered. So she doesn't want anyone to recover these heirlooms. So unless they said that they were working with this lady, this bugbear was going to attack them. And it basically is standing behind a wall in the cliff with a little hole in it, and it stabs out with a spear onto the staircase. And it's an interesting, like, how do you deal with this thing just stabbing out at you from this little hole? Really, your best bet is just run past. And that's what they eventually do. My nephew used his special ability to look through walls. So he looked through the wall of the mountain and saw that there was a bugbear standing there. So they ran up the stairs. They got stabbed a little bit on the way. And at the top of the stairs, they come to this little gatehouse and they fight the bugbear. And so it was 1 versus 6 as he charges towards them, and they all just pull out their crossbows and just fucking unload on the dude. So it was not a It's not an incredibly lengthy combat. They search the room, they find a key, they continue upwards to these big metal gates. Very big, imposing gates. And they use the key, they open up the big gates, and they enter the dwarven ruins. And no, I don't have the adventure up here that I could tell you exactly what happened. Let me try and think. So they start poking into these ruins. They find this room filled with all these like pedestal or like pillars, and carved into the pillars is a bunch of dwarven lords and runes, and there's a pedestal with 3 keyholes in it. And it's like, well, okay, obviously they tried the key on that they used on the gates, but that didn't work. They're like, okay, we don't have 3 keys. And my aunt is like, oh, I speak Dwarvish. I can read Dwarvish. I'm like, why? Why can you read Dwarvish? She's not a dwarf. And she's like, well, when I was a bartender, I taught myself. And it's just like, fine. Because I'm sure if none of them spoke Dwarvish, they would just ask Artemis, who's tagging along with them. And, you know, Artemis, of course, can read Dwarvish. So fine. You know, it makes the whole thing a lot easier if one of them can read Dwarvish. And they learn all the names of these dwarven lords and the corresponding runes and blah, blah, blah. They continue on. They continue on to this this lift, this like old school like elevator, you know. And they debate for a little while about like, oh, should we all go on? Should we split the party? You know, should we send one person to test it out? And, because I had said, at some point that like splitting the party and going off to do your own thing is really discouraged. You know, when you're playing in a group, you bring everyone to the table and you're playing together. Going off to do your own thing and taking up the DM's time for your own thing is really sort of discouraged. You know, it needs to be important. It needs to be like something that's agreed upon by the whole group. Like sometimes you'll be in a town and you know, I'll do this all the time where it's like we have a plan that I need to bring together, and it's like, okay, you go do this thing, you go do this part of the plan, you go do this part of the plan. You know, these are multiple things that need to be done. Then it makes sense, and everyone agrees, like we have to split up. We're in a town, we're not just going to go from point to point to point all together. Like, okay, split up. But the classic example of like the thief waking up in the middle of the night or whatever to go off and steal, that's really discouraged. So I had told them this, just, you know, something to keep in mind. And they took this as like, oh, well, we can't ever split up. You can't send one person on this lift. We'll be split apart, so we all have to go. And I'm like, that's not what I meant. But they all decided, okay, well, we're all gonna go in the lift together, and they do. And fortunately, the lift is perfectly functional. You know, it's used by these bandits and stuff. Nothing bad happened, but I'm like, okay, if I was playing, I would never have all of us go in the lift at the same time. Like, we would never do that. You would send one person to give it a try. This is an unknown, you know, contraption in a ruin. You can't trust it, you know, implicitly to just carry all of you at once. So I think they learned there. I you know, they'll correct that. So they get to the bottom of the lift. They come to this cross section, and I mentioned that there's like one corridor that sort of just stops. It like continues for a little bit, and then it stops. And so they picked up that, okay, there's got to be some sort of secret doorway here. So they start poking around, and they find the way to open the secret door. And they notice that there's no way to open it from the other side, so they use an iron spike that I told them to buy. They asked Artemis, like, oh, you know, what supplies should we bring into a dungeon? And I'm like, well, you know, grappling hook would be good, climbing equipment, iron spikes, rations. So they had bought like all of them. They all bought iron spikes. You know, it's up to them to sort of decide how to use them. But they came on the idea of their own to use an iron spike to keep this door open. So good for them. And so a couple of them start venturing into this corridor past the secret door while the rest stay behind. And as soon as they turn the corner down this new corridor, 4 skeletons rise from the ground and start attacking them. And these skeletons are dangerous, man. These things were painful. So initially there was only like 3 of them in the fight, and they were outnumbered and, you know, outmatched. So like 2 of them like went down in the first round. It was crazy. The others rush in during the second round, and they had found a wand of cure wounds. So that helps a lot. It has like 23 charges. They can heal a whole bunch. And so they decide, okay, the only way, or the best way for them to deal with this fight against these powerful skeletons is to get Duke back up. He got knocked down. He's unconscious. They need to get him back up so that he can use his once per day Hulk ability that I gave him. That he's never used it. He's never used it. He's been saving it, but they're like, this is a dire situation. We got to get him up. He's got to Hulk out, and he's got to bash these skeletons. And I'm like, yeah, that'll, you know, that's a plan. So they get him up. He's like, all right, Hulk out. I Hulk out. And obviously, if he actually became the Hulk, I mean, that's a little overpowered. So it's not, I didn't make it quite that overpowered, but fairly overpowered. I would say he probably has the best ability of any of them, compared to my sister's ability of being able to speak to animals. Being able to become the Hulk for 10 minutes a day is pretty good. So basically, I gave him like, I gave him like +5 to his attack roll or something, or no, maybe I gave him +10, really. I made his strength a 20. Or something, yeah, something like, I gave him like +10 to his attack roll. I gave his damage die as a D12 with +5 damage, and it like I made it like carry over to another target as well. So if he hit one target, the damage will copy over to another one. As you know, he's just smashing things with his fist, especially skeletons. I mean, it's bludgeoning damage. It's perfect. If he had crit on his attack roll, I would have just had him wipe out all 4 instantly. But he got like a 19, and he rolled well on his damage, so he instantly took out 2 of them. And I changed his miniature to like a large mini, so he's taking up like the whole corridor. And I'm like, okay, he's like blocking the corridor pretty much. I'm giving him like temporary HP and some damage resistance, so these skeletons aren't really even gonna fucking hurt him. But 2 of the other players decided they wanted to get in there and hit the skeletons themselves with like sticks. So they go past the Hulk right up to the skeletons, and they try and hit them, and they don't kill any of them. And then it's like, okay, well, the skeletons are just gonna wail on you instead. So one of them goes down as well. But eventually the Hulk cleans up, and that was that. So they survived because of the Hulk. It would have been really tough without it, but you know, that's what it is. You know, when we like transfer to D&D, I'll just make him like a barbarian or something, you know, give him berserker rage, and that'll be a bit of a nerf, but whatever. They continue past the skeletons. They go through some more corridors. They find another shaft with like a broken lift. They find a lift that's like wedged 15 feet down and is not operational. So they tie up some ropes. They use a grappling hook. They climb down there. They use a saw to like cut through the lift. You know, they used logic. I didn't really detect any issues with it. I didn't really have them roll much. They're using their brains. They're using the proper tools. I can't punish them for that. They make it to the bottom of the shaft, and here's where we come to the major puzzle. Basically, it was this long hallway, and at the end of it, there's this shining silver anvil and like a golden hammer hanging in the air above it. And along the way, there were 6 stones, each bearing one of the 6 runes that they read or they found at the start of the ruins, at the start of the dungeon. And there was some dwarvish text that sort of subtly implied what they were supposed to do. So if you just start walking down the hallway, the hammer will animate and start attacking you until you run away. And, you know, it'll just start beating on you. So to prevent that, you just have to say the name of the dwarven lord, whose name corresponds to the rune on the ground. And there's 6 of them, and you just say the names in order out loud, and you'll be able to get to the end of the hallway, you know, and take the anvil. They could not get this. They could not get this. They were trying all sorts of stuff to try and like grab the hammer. They were like, okay, we have to jump on each of the runes. And I'm like, all right, they're like 10 feet apart or something like that, you know? And they're like, okay, what if we throw objects onto the runes? And it's just like, oh my, and it just went on and on of them trying all this nonsense. And I was just like giving them more and more hints. More and more hints about, you know. And then at a certain point I was like, okay, if they just say any of the names out loud, I'll have like one of the runes glow brightly, and a voice will say, dumbasses, you're finally getting it. Like just say any of the names. They never got it. And so eventually I'm like, all right, we're not going to spend all fucking night here. So Artemis steps forward and basically just solves the puzzle for them. And they're like, oh, we would have never gotten that. And it's like, oh my God. Fine. So yeah, whatever. So they come to the anvil. The hammer disappears. I don't know if it actually disappears, but the module doesn't mention it as like treasure. So I figured, whatever, just make it disappear. But the anvil is there. It's a silver magical anvil. And any dwarven craftsman or blacksmith that uses it gets like major bonuses to their crafting checks. And if they bring this back to the dwarven blacksmith in the town, will like make them all sorts of weapons for free and shit. He'll give them like magical weapons for free. I wonder if they'll actually think of that or if they'll just try and sell it to some merchant or, you know, we'll see. Because the dwarven blacksmith won't actually pay them for the anvil. He won't give them money for the anvil because it's a dwarven artifact. Like, it belongs to the dwarves. Like, they have no right to it. There's no finders keepers here. But he will give them weapons in return. So they might, you know, we'll see. Then in this hallway, there's 2 doors. They check out one and they open it up and they find like this big dwarven like blast furnace. And they find that it's still running. It's still being used because there's like this little salamander that's making weapons using this forge. And if they inspected the room closer, they'd find that he's basically like trapped in this magical sigil. He's trapped in this room until someone enters the sigil and crosses the sigil and lets him loose. At which point he'll basically just flee. And if they continue to search the room, they'll find like masterwork weapons because he's been working on these things for like hundreds of years. But they open the room, they see a big furnace, they see this little snake creature, and they're like, fuck that. And they close the doors and they just move on. Wow. Such bravery. Such courage among these 6 heroes. Anyways, they open up the next door and they find essentially the dwarven treasure room that holds all like their special artifacts. So there's like a magical crown, there's a magical weapon that's good against killing goblins. There's a shield that's not magical, but it's a nice shield. There's a dragon's tooth. A broken dragon's tooth. There's this like tablet that contains a writ of like a sale record for some mithril, but it's actually a coded message that the module is just like, yeah, the coded message could lead to whatever other adventure you want to give your players. So it's like, okay, fine. And then finally, there's an open, hatched egg. There's the remnants of an egg there. And as they start up, they're like cautiously poking their heads in and poking around, they get attacked by a very young white dragon. So this thing was basically, the egg was held in stasis for a long time. They stole it from some dragon. It was held in stasis by dwarven magic for a long time, but now it wore off and the dragon hatched, and it's very ravenous. It's starving, basically. But even though it's very young, it is still a dragon, so it is still kind of a threat. This thing had like 45 HP and could do some serious damage. And so they get into a fight with this thing. First, they try like throwing it jerky, but this thing, like I said, it's starving. So it sees a lot of food in front of it. It's a little out of its mind. It charges in. So they start cutting into it, and they just surround this thing and just fucking beat the ever-loving shit out of it. My sister just comes in with like her great sword and does 10 damage on like the first turn. This thing gets like 1 or 2 attacks in. It's at like 5 HP, and I'm like, all right, it backs out and it breathes ice all over you. And so I was like, okay, roll dexterity. You know, if they roll like 14 or 15 or higher, they'll take half damage. Everyone else will take full damage. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do like 2D. I'm gonna do 2d6 damage because yeah, they don't have a lot of health. I mean, like some of them have like 8 HP. They don't have a lot of health. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do 2d6 damage. I roll a 1 and then a 1. I'm like, all right, fuck it, 3d6, and then I roll a 2. So, or it was like a 3. So they ended up being 5 damage, 2 to the people that rolled dex, you know, well enough. It was like just this perfect, just pathetic last gasp of this dragon. Yeah, recapping D&D that I ran for my family the other day. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have it collapse. I'm gonna have it just like pass out from the exertion. It's starving. It just got the shit beaten out of it. It tried to breathe ice all over him and basically failed. So it passes out. Combat is over. Now they begin discussing what to do with this dragon. And the predominant option, the predominant opinion among the group is that they should just slit its throat and move on. And I, as the DM, I can't weigh in on this. This is, you know, they're not stuck. They're not like in need of a decision maker here. I mean, they sort of are, but they're discussing it. And most of them feel like they should just kill it and move on with their lives. My sister, the one that can speak to animals, she asks if she can speak to it. And I said, well, no, it's not really an animal. It's an intelligent creature, but it can't speak common yet. I don't even know if it could speak Draconic yet. I don't really know exactly how that works. None of them speak Draconic, but I decided this can't speak common yet, and she can't use her speak with animals to sort of understand it. So I said, no, you can't speak with it. But I did say to her that if anyone could like raise it and train it, you would be in the best position to do so because of your affinity with animals, with animal life. You know, it's not exactly like she would never be able to speak to it in that way, and you eventually would learn how to speak common, but she would be in a better position because she is gifted at raising animals. I said that to her. That seemed to just sort of go in one ear out the other for whatever reason. She'd never really raised a fuss with the others who were talking about killing the dragon. But then she was profoundly disappointed when ultimately my aunt walked over and slit the thing's throat. And she started blaming me because I told her she couldn't speak with it. And I'm like, that is not a prerequisite for raising an animal. You know, people train horses. They don't have to fucking be able to speak horse to do so. This is not my fault. And I even said you'd be in the best position to raise it. It just was like, this is not my fault. And she admitted, yeah, you're right. You did say that. And I'm like, okay. So after it was done, I was like, all right, it's dead. It's dead. Then I was like, okay, if I was playing, I would have never in a million years killed this animal, this creature. It would have never have happened. Even if no one in our group was interested in training it, you know, even if we didn't have like a beast master in our group, which they did, we would still tie it up and bring it back to town to sell it for thousands of fucking gold. Are you kidding me? Like a baby dragon? That's fucking valuable, man. And they're so interested in like treasure and loot, and they did not see any value. They did not even think of tying it up. That thought didn't even enter their mind. Because I said, like, after they grabbed all the other loot, I'm like, oh, the dragon is starting to stir. And they're like, oh, well, you know, it's gonna attack us again. We don't want anyone to die, so kill it. So they slit its throat. And my mom calls me up the next day, and she's just like, I cannot stop thinking about how we killed that dragon. She was like so upset. This like ruined the whole night for her, because she really did not argue. She was not argumentative during the whole discussion. She just sort of was sitting on the sidelines. But it really bugged her that they killed the dragon. And it's like, well, it is what it is. You got to speak up. You got to make your arguments. And she didn't really think of tying it up either, or, you know, trying to say that. Again, it was like this big revelation after I said it for some reason. But anyways, they took all the treasure. They took everything else. They grabbed the anvil, and that's basically where we ended the session. On that very sour note of killing this dragon. Yeah, but it's not, and if they had asked Artemis, like, what would you do with this dragon? If they had asked that, I would have given my honest opinion. But they didn't consult Artemis about anything. So it's like, okay, they made up their minds. They had a group decision. The majority won, or the most vocal part of the group won, and they did what they did, and it's done. So live with it. But yeah, I mean, the module does not mention that the dragon collapses or anything. I'm sure the module intends for them to just slay it in combat, but I gave them a rare opportunity to capture a live baby dragon. Anywho, so that's how we ended. So next time they're gonna keep poking through. They have the rest of the dwarven ruins to check out. Then they'll probably head over to the goblins. All 8 of them. All 8 of the players, and we'll see how it all goes. I'm thinking though, after we do this adventure, which will probably take a few more weeks at least, if we do, that's probably when I would switch to D&D, and I'm thinking of running Curse of Strahd, which is apparently the best like adventure that's been written for 5th edition. Like, a lot of people really like this Curse of Strahd, and I like the theme of it quite a bit. So that's where I'm leaning right now. The only issue is that Curse of Strahd is not really like traditional high fantasy stuff. Like, it's a bit more horror. So I don't know if that's really the best fit. I might think about it some more, but we'll see. Your group was planning Curse of Strahd recently, and then you thought better of it. I mean, I want to be fairly sure about my decision, because it is sort of a big investment of time. You know, I have to read the whole thing. I ran a while, like when we first started playing D&D with this group, the initial group, I did like the giant one. I don't even remember the name of it. Storm King's Thunder. I started to run that. I did a bunch of reading for that, but they got like 4 sessions in or something like that, and they basically fucked up to a degree that was just like, this is over. You guys are too stupid to do this. They just could not figure out how to do anything creative at the time. I mean, they were really just floundering. I think they would be a little bit better now, and especially if I have Artemis tagging along that they can bounce questions off of and offer some advice occasionally. I don't think they would ever get stuck. So, but I don't really want to do Storm King's Thunder because they would recognize the same setup, I think. So maybe Horde of the Dragon Queen. I have to look at like reviews and stuff, but that seems sort of traditional high fantasy kind of stuff. Princes of the Apocalypse is like massive. That takes you from levels 1 to 15. That's insane. Tales of the Yawning Portal is just like a bunch of one-shots from what I understand. Tyranny of Dragons. Oh, Tyranny of Dragons is Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat together. Okay. Ghost of Saltmarsh is sort of like an aquatic thing, which is kind of interesting, but nothing really came of it. I think it would be cool. Ever try Horde of the Dragon Queen? Well, no. But that is one for consideration, because that's levels 1 through 7, so it's not that lengthy, or it's not as lengthy as some of the others. And I do like that it involves dragons. I think they all like that. They like killing dragons. Is it well reviewed? Do people like it? Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, the reviews seem pretty solid. This came out early. I mean, this was one of the first things they brought out. 2014. Yeah, that was when the game came out. So this was like the first real big adventure. Well, that could be good then. Then they sort of design it, I assume, for like new players a little bit, which will be helpful. Horde of the Dragon Queen isn't that good as far as I know, but Jeffrey said it thought it was pretty cool when you tried it. Well, I mean, I'll always give it a quick read, see what I think. Like I'm sure Curse of Strahd is really good, but it is a big investment, and the horror aspects sort of concern me because I'd have to downplay a lot of it. Like, this is not a group that really loves horror. Like, there's a lot of like zombies and rotting and decaying and death, and it's like that's a big part of the appeal, is how grim and dark it is. But I know they would not appreciate it that much. So something more just traditional high fantasy would be probably a better thematic fit. And I don't think they care if it's not like the best adventure in the world. I don't think they're that picky. So might be all right. Anyways, I've talked long enough. I got to get to editing this Final Fantasy video. So check out the Jasper's Hill SCP video tomorrow. Episode 2 of the story of Final Fantasy 14 later this week. On this channel, we've got the last video of Cyberpunk, last video of Dragon Quest V, first video of Doom Eternal DLC, first video of Dragon Quest VI. Variety stream on Wednesday, which I think we should do Baldur's Gate 3. I think we should take a look, especially because I'm starting to, you know, look into some D&D things here. It makes sense. I think we should give Baldur's Gate 3 a look. Possibly the last video for Two Brothers Play Final Fantasy VI. All that good stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. My name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. See you fine folks next week.